It was 6:30 in the morning at John F. Kennedy International Airport in New York. The sky outside was a cold, pale gray, and inside Terminal 4, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sterile glow over the endless lines of travelers. Among them stood a man who appeared utterly unremarkable. He wore a simple beige thobe, slightly wrinkled from the 14-hour flight from Dubai. His beard was neatly trimmed, his eyes tired but calm. He carried only a small leather bag over his shoulder, and walked with the quiet patience of someone who had learned long ago that rushing rarely changed anything. His name was Khalid Al-Rashid. He was 62 years old, and he was worth more than $11 billion, but nobody in that airport knew that. Not yet. Khalid had deliberately chosen to fly commercial for this trip. No private jet, no entourage, no fanfare. He wanted to arrive in America the way his father once had, nearly 50 years ago, as a stranger in a foreign land, carrying nothing but hope and dignity. This trip was personal, deeply personal. As Khalid approached the immigration line, he noticed how the other passengers glanced at him. Some looked away quickly, others stared a moment too long. He was used to it. In his experience, a Middle Eastern man in traditional clothing attracted attention in Western airports, the way a lit match attracts moths. He didn't mind. He had nothing to hide. The line moved slowly. Families shuffled forward with overstuffed suitcases. Business travelers tapped impatiently on their phones. A young mother tried to calm a crying toddler. Khalid watched them all with quiet interest, remembering a time when he too had stood in lines like this, uncertain of what waited on the other side. Finally, it was his turn. The immigration officer was a woman in her early 40s. Her name tag read Officer Patricia Hendricks. She had sharp eyes, a firm jaw, and the kind of expression that suggested she had seen every trick in the book and wasn't impressed by any of them. "Passport," she said, without looking up. Khalid handed it over. A United Arab Emirates passport, burgundy and gold. Officer Hendricks examined it carefully, flipping through the pages. Her eyebrows rose slightly at the number of stamps. London, Tokyo, Sao Paulo, Sydney, Paris, dozens more. "Purpose of your visit?" she asked. "Personal matter," Khalid replied. His English was impeccable, polished by years of international business. "What kind of personal matter?" "I'm here to visit someone." "Who?" Khalid paused. "An old friend." Officer Hendricks looked up from the passport, studying his face. There was something in her eyes, not hostility exactly, but suspicion, the kind of suspicion that had been trained into her over years of working this job. "Where will you be staying?" "The Plaza Hotel." "How long?" "3 days." She typed something into her computer. The seconds stretched. Khalid remained perfectly still, his hands folded in front of him. "Step aside, please," Officer Hendricks said suddenly. Khalid blinked. "I'm sorry. I need you to step aside for additional screening. Someone will be with you shortly." A murmur rippled through the line behind him. Khalid felt the weight of dozens of eyes on his back. He took a slow breath and nodded. "Of course," he said quietly. "Before we continue this incredible story, I want to ask you something. Where are you watching from right now? Drop your country or city in the comments below. I love seeing how far this community reaches around the world. And if you're new here, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. We post stories like this every week, stories that will surprise you, move you, and stay with you long after the video ends. You don't want to miss what's coming next. Now, let's get back to Khalid. He was led to a small, windowless room with white walls and a metal table. 2 plastic chairs faced each other under the harsh glare of a single overhead light. It looked like every interrogation room in every movie Khalid had ever seen. A security officer stood by the door, a young man with a crew cut and an expression of studied neutrality. He didn't speak, he just watched. Khalid sat down and waited. 20 minutes passed, then 30. Khalid didn't check his watch. He didn't fidget or pace. He simply sat with his hands on the table, breathing slowly, his mind drifting to memories of another time, another airport, another life. The door opened. A man walked in. He was perhaps 50, with graying hair and a rumpled suit that suggested he'd been working since before dawn. His badge identified him as Supervisory Agent Agent Torres, Department of Homeland Security. Torres sat down across from Khalid and placed a manila folder on the table between them. "Mr. Al-Rashid," he said, "thank you for your patience." "Of course." Torres opened the folder. Inside were printouts, photographs, documents, what appeared to be financial records. "You're a businessman, correct?" "I am." "What kind of business?" "Many kinds. Energy, real estate, technology investments." Torres nodded slowly. "Our system flagged your entry. Large wire transfers to accounts in the United States over the past 6 months. Significant amounts. Can you explain what those were for?" Khalid studied the agent's face. He saw no malice there, only duty. A man doing his job, following protocols, trying to keep his country safe. Khalid respected that. Those transfers were donations, Khalid said. Donations to what? Various charitable organizations, hospitals mostly, and one children's foundation. Torres leaned back in his chair. That's a lot of money for charity. I have a lot of money, so I've gathered. Torres flipped through more pages. It says here you own properties in Manhattan, Los Angeles, and Miami, yet you've never applied for a visa to live here. Why is that? Because I don't want to live here. I want to visit. There's a difference. And this visit, you said it's personal. Care to elaborate? Khalid was silent for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. 47 years ago, I came to this country for the first time. I was 15 years old. My father brought me here to show me what was possible, what a man could build if he worked hard enough and dreamed big enough. We had nothing then. We slept in a tiny apartment in Queens with 3 other families. My father worked 18-hour days washing dishes in a restaurant downtown. Torres listened, his expression unchanged. One night, Khalid continued, I got very sick. A fever that wouldn't break. My father had no money for a doctor, no insurance, nothing. He carried me in his arms through the streets of New York in the middle of the night, going from hospital to hospital, begging someone to help his son. Khalid paused, his eyes distant. Finally, a nurse at a small clinic in Brooklyn took pity on us. She stayed past her shift, treated me herself, gave my father medicine, and refused to accept payment. She said something I never forgot. She said, in this country we take care of each other. That's what makes us American. Torres said nothing. Her name was Margaret Chen. She was 26 years old. She saved my life. Khalid reached into his leather bag and pulled out an old photograph, yellowed with age. It showed a young Asian woman in a nurse's uniform, smiling at the camera, standing outside a modest brick building. I've been searching for her for 30 years, Khalid said. Last month, I finally found her. She's 81 now. She lives in a nursing home in Queens. She's dying of cancer, and her insurance won't cover the treatment that could save her. She has no family left, no one to help her. He placed the photograph on the table. I'm here to pay for her treatment, every penny of it. I'm here to save the life of the woman who saved mine. The room was absolutely silent. Torres stared at the photograph, then at Khalid, then at the photograph again. Something shifted in his face, the professional mask slipping, just for a moment, to reveal the human being underneath. You came all this way, Torres said slowly, to help a woman who helped you almost 50 years ago. I came to repay a debt that can never truly be repaid, but I have to try. Torres closed the folder. He sat back in his chair, rubbing his jaw, clearly wrestling with something. Mr. Al-Rashid, I have to ask, why didn't you just explain this at the immigration counter? Why didn't you tell Officer Hendricks? Khalid smiled faintly. Would she have believed me? Would you have believed me if I had simply announced, I'm a billionaire here to save an old nurse? In my experience, Agent Torres, the truth often sounds like a lie when spoken too easily. It must be earned. Torres was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood up. Wait here. He left the room. The young security officer remained by the door, but his expression had changed. There was something like curiosity in his eyes now, maybe even respect. 15 minutes later, Torres returned. He wasn't alone. Officer Patricia Hendricks walked in behind him, the woman who had pulled Khalid aside, who had looked at him with suspicion and doubt. Her face was different now. Not suspicious, but something else, something harder to read. She stopped in front of Khalid's chair. Mr. Al-Rashid, she said, I owe you an apology. Khalid shook his head. You owe me nothing. You were doing your job, maybe. But I judged you before I knew you. I saw what you looked like and made assumptions. That's not the kind of officer I want to be. You saw a man in traditional Arab clothing and wondered if he might be dangerous. In today's world, I understand why. I don't hold it against you. Hendricks swallowed hard. My grandfather was Japanese. He was put in an internment camp during World War II. He used to tell me stories about being treated like an enemy in his own country, just because of how he looked. I swore I'd never treat anyone that way, and today I did. I'm sorry. Khalid stood up. He extended his hand. Then let us both do better tomorrow. Hendricks shook his hand firmly. There were tears in her eyes that she was fighting hard to hide. Torres cleared his throat. Mr. Al-Rashid, you're free to go, and for what it's worth, what you're doing for that woman is one of the most remarkable things I've ever heard. It's not remarkable, Khalid said. It's simply human. Kindness given should be kindness returned. That nurse taught me that 47 years ago. I'm only now able to prove I was listening. Khalid gathered his bag and the old photograph. As he walked toward the door, Torres spoke again. Mr. Al-Rashid, one more question if you don't mind. Khalid turned. Your father, the one who carried you through the streets that night. What happened to him? Khalid's face softened with old grief. He died when I was 23. A heart attack. He never saw what I became, never saw the company I built, the fortune I made. He died believing he had failed, that he hadn't given his son enough. He went to his grave not knowing that everything I am, Everything I have exists because of what he gave me that night in Brooklyn. He gave me hope. He gave me the belief that there are good people in this world, people who will help a stranger simply because it's the right thing to do. Khalid paused at the door. I build hospitals in his name now. Schools, clinics, all over the world. But this, saving Margaret Chen, this is for him. This is my way of telling him, wherever he is, that his sacrifice mattered, that it changed everything. He walked out of the room and into the bright fluorescent maze of the airport. But the story wasn't over. Not even close. Khalid took a taxi to Queens. The nursing home was called Sunrise Gardens, a modest red brick building on a quiet street lined with bare winter trees. The kind of place where people came to spend their final days, surrounded by the ghosts of the lives they had lived. He signed in at the front desk. A young receptionist looked at him with mild curiosity but asked no questions. Visitors came and went all day. One more was hardly remarkable. Room 117. Khalid walked down the hallway slowly, his heart beating harder than it had in years. He had negotiated billion-dollar deals with calm precision. He had addressed world leaders and industry titans without a tremor in his voice. But now, approaching this simple door, he felt like a 15-year-old boy again, scared and feverish in a strange land. He knocked. "Come in," said a voice, thin, fragile, but still warm. He opened the door. The room was small but filled with light. Flowers sat on the windowsill. Yellow daisies, bright against the gray winter sky. Medical equipment hummed quietly in the corner. And in the bed, propped up against pillows, sat an elderly woman with silver hair and kind eyes, Margaret Chen. She looked at him with confusion at first, studying his face, searching for recognition. "I'm sorry," she said. "Do I know you?" Khalid stepped closer. He reached into his bag and pulled out the photograph, the same one he had shown Agent Torres. He placed it gently on the bed beside her. Margaret picked it up with trembling hands. She stared at it for a long moment, her brow furrowing. "That's me," she whispered. 40 years ago, maybe more. "Where did you get this?" "My father took it," Khalid said. "The morning after you saved my life." Margaret looked up at him sharply. Her eyes widened. "The boy," she breathed. "The little boy with the fever. Ahmed's son, from the apartment in Queens." "Yes, but my name is Khalid. I was 15 years old. You stayed past your shift to help me. You gave my father medicine and refused any payment. You told him that in America, people take care of each other." Margaret's hand flew to her mouth. Tears spilled down her wrinkled cheeks. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Oh my God, I remember your father crying, holding you so tight. He was so scared he would lose you. He never forgot you. Neither did I. But how did you find me? After all these years?" Khalid pulled up a chair and sat beside her bed. "It took me 30 years of searching. You moved so many times. You changed your name when you got married, but I never gave up. I couldn't. I owed you everything." He took her hand in his. Her skin was paper thin, marked with age spots and IV bruises. "Margaret, I know about your illness. I know the treatment isn't covered by your insurance. I know you've been preparing yourself to die." She looked away, ashamed. "There's nothing to be done," the doctors said. "The doctors were wrong. There's a treatment available at Memorial Sloan Kettering. Experimental but effective. It's expensive. Very expensive. I could never afford." "You don't have to afford it. I'm paying for everything. The treatment, the hospital stay, the follow-up care, everything. And when you're well enough to leave here, I've arranged for a private apartment in Manhattan with full-time nursing care. You'll want for nothing for the rest of your life." Margaret stared at him, uncomprehending. "I don't understand. Why would you do this? You don't even know me. I know the only thing that matters. I know that 47 years ago, you showed kindness to a stranger. That kindness changed the course of my life. It changed everything, and now it's my turn to show kindness to you." Margaret broke down completely. She sobbed, deep, wrenching sobs that shook her frail body. Khalid held her hand and said nothing. Some moments were too sacred for words. When she finally calmed, she looked at him with red-rimmed eyes. "Your father," she said. "Ahmed, whatever happened to him?" Khalid's jaw tightened. "He passed away when I was 23. He worked himself to death, trying to give me opportunities he never had. He never saw what I became. But he's the reason you became it." "Yes, he is." Margaret squeezed his hand with surprising strength. "Then you need to know something, Khalid. Something I never told anyone." Khalid leaned closer. "That night when your father brought you to the clinic, I almost didn't help. I was exhausted. I'd been working double shifts for weeks. I was about to tell him to go somewhere else, that there was nothing I could do. But then I looked at his face, at the way he held you, and I saw my own father." She paused, gathering herself. "My father was an immigrant too, from China. He came to this country with nothing, just like Ahmed. He worked in a laundry for 30 years, pressing shirts until his hands were raw, and when I was 12, I got very sick, pneumonia. We had no money for doctors. My father walked 10 miles in the snow to find a clinic that would help us. A doctor there, a man whose name I never knew, saved my life and charged us nothing. Tears streamed down her face. I became a nurse because of that man. I swore that if I ever had the chance to help someone the way he helped me, I would do it without hesitation. Your father gave me that chance. Helping you wasn't charity, Khalid. It was completing a circle, passing on a gift that was given to me. Khalid sat in stunned silence. The room seemed to shrink around him, the weight of this revelation settling over him like a blanket. So you see, Margaret continued, you're not repaying a debt. You're continuing a tradition, a chain of kindness that stretches back generations. Your father was a link. I was a link. And now you're a link too. Khalid thought about the hospitals he had built, the schools, the clinics. He thought about the thousands of lives touched by his philanthropy, and he realized for the first time that none of it had started with him. It had started with a nameless doctor in a small clinic, decades before Khalid was even born. Then I have to keep the chain going, he said finally. That's all any of us can do. 3 days later, Khalid stood in the hallway of Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. Margaret had been admitted for her first round of treatment. The doctors were optimistic, cautiously, professionally optimistic, but optimistic nonetheless. Khalid watched through the window as nurses prepared her room. She looked small in that hospital bed, fragile, but there was a light in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Hope, the most powerful medicine of all. His phone buzzed. A message from his assistant in Dubai, asking when he would return. Khalid typed a response. Extend my stay. 1 more week. There's something I need to do. He had an idea, a big idea. He would establish a foundation in Margaret's name. The Margaret Chen Foundation for Immigrant Health. It would provide free medical care to immigrant families across America, regardless of their ability to pay. It would be his largest philanthropic project yet. But more than that, it would be a promise to every frightened father carrying a sick child through the streets, a promise that someone would be there to help, that the chain of kindness would never be broken. Khalid returned to the nursing home one last time before Margaret's transfer. He wanted to tell her about the foundation, to see her reaction. But when he arrived, he found her room occupied by someone else, a young woman in her 20s, sitting in the visitor's chair, holding Margaret's hand. Khalid stopped in the doorway. I'm sorry, the young woman said, looking up. Are you a friend of Margaret's? Yes, my name is Khalid. The young woman's eyes widened. You're Khalid, the one paying for her treatment? I am. She stood up quickly, wiping her eyes. I'm Sarah Chen. I'm Margaret's granddaughter. Khalid felt the floor shift beneath him. Granddaughter? I was told she had no family. We were estranged. For years, I was angry at her for things that don't matter anymore. I didn't even know she was sick until 3 days ago. When a lawyer called to tell me about your gift, I came as fast as I could. She broke down crying. I almost let her die alone. I almost let my pride keep me from saying goodbye. If you hadn't done what you did, I never would have had the chance to make things right. Khalid looked at Margaret, who was watching from her bed with tears streaming down her face. You gave me back my granddaughter, Margaret whispered. You didn't just save my life. You saved my family. Khalid thought about his own father, about the words left unspoken, the reconciliations that never happened, the forgiveness that came too late. He thought about the chain of kindness and realized it worked in ways he had never imagined, not just saving lives, but healing wounds, bridging distances, bringing people home. I think, Khalid said slowly, that perhaps this is what kindness really does. It doesn't just help the person you give it to. It ripples outward, touching lives you never knew existed, mending breaks you never knew were there. Sarah crossed the room and hugged him. A stranger embracing a stranger, united by something larger than both of them. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for giving us another chance. 1 week later, Khalid boarded a flight back to Dubai. He had established the foundation, signed the paperwork, set everything in motion. Margaret was responding well to treatment. Sarah had moved into the private apartment to care for her grandmother. The chain of kindness was continuing. As the plane lifted off over the gray Atlantic, Khalid looked out the window at the receding skyline of New York. Somewhere down there, in a hospital room filled with flowers, an old woman was fighting for her life and winning. He thought about Officer Hendricks, who had learned something about judgment and grace. He thought about Agent Torres, who had been reminded why he did his job. He thought about Margaret and Sarah, grandmother and granddaughter, finally together after years apart. And he thought about his father. I hope you can see this, Khalid whispered to the clouds. I hope you know that your sacrifice meant something, that the kindness you showed me, the kindness that nurse showed us, is still alive in the world, still growing, still changing lives. The plane climbed higher, breaking through the clouds into brilliant sunlight. Below, the world continued to turn, full of strangers carrying burdens, fathers holding sick children, nurses working double shifts, billionaires with secrets, and ordinary people performing extraordinary acts of grace. The chain of kindness stretched on, link by link, heart by heart, across oceans and generations, connecting all of them, and it would never be broken.